I followed Ethan Carter for 5 years, yet he put the ring I designed on another woman's finger. This time, I didn't make a scene. I deleted the design drafts, resigned from my position. People in the company started betting on how long it would take before I'd swallow my pride and come crawling back. Ethan gave a cold smile and said I'd return within a week to beg him. But this time, I never contacted him again. Eventually, when he couldn't hold out anymore, he called me. "I had your design drafts recovered," he said. But on the other end of the call came a man's low chuckle. "Sorry, Mia's not up yet." Ethan's voice sounded hoarse. "Let Mia answer the phone," he said. Then came a gentle, yet clearly mocking female voice, "Hannah, deliberate and unrestrained. President Carter, she's someone else's woman now, don't hold out hope." The autumn wind carried a biting chill. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of Story Jewelry's headquarters, quietly studying the design sketch in my hands. A diamond at the center, surrounded by sapphires, it was a 5-piece collection, from earrings to necklace to a matching ring set. It represented the 5 years I had spent with Ethan. It was supposed to be my 5th anniversary gift to him. I glanced at the time. There was 1 hour left before the evening's year-end gala. My heart beat a little faster. I smoothed the wrinkles on my beige tailored dress and gently walked to the door of his office. Inside, I heard Ethan's deep voice. "Miss Lin, what do you think of this designer's skill?" My hand paused midair. "Not bad," came the woman's lazy tone, dripping with arrogance. "She's got some ideas, but now that I'm here, she can just be my assistant. She's a nobody anyway, no background. Just give her something to keep her busy and brush her aside." I saw his long fingers picking up the blueprint from the table, the very one I had revised countless times, yet in his hands, all those carefully drawn lines seemed so insignificant. "You're right," Ethan said, with a faint laugh, his voice colder than I'd ever heard before. "How long were you two together?" she asked. "Just 5 years," he said indifferently. "Give her a decent position and send her away. She's not the type to cling." I lowered my gaze to the design draft in my hands. My fingers trembled. The wind outside was sharp and stung my eyes. That evening, at the year-end gala, the champagne tower sparkled like a galaxy under the crystal chandelier. The room was filled with shifting silhouettes beneath the lights. "Welcome, honored guests," Ethan stood on the stage like royalty. "Tonight, I have an important announcement to make." He paused for a second, his gaze sweeping the crowd before landing on Lauren Lin, who stood directly across from me. "Story Jewelry will enter a comprehensive strategic partnership with the Lin Group," he said, raising his champagne glass. His voice was warm, almost unfamiliar. "And I am honored to announce Miss Lauren Lin will become Mrs. Carter." Applause erupted. Lauren walked up beside him, retrieved a deep green tie clip from a velvet box, and said, "I had this custom made by the Paris Atelier. It suits you perfectly. The stone is an emerald I acquired in London last year. It took 3 months to hand polish. Even the crescent moon engraving on the inner edge was done by me." "You're always so thoughtful," he said as he lowered his head and let Lauren pin the clip onto his tie, like he had never played with that same gemstone before. "Never once told me on the banks of the Seine, it's so beautiful. Just like your eyes. And this." Lauren raised her left hand. My pupils shrank. The diamond ring on her ring finger gleamed brilliantly under the spotlight, its design unmistakably mine. "They say this was Mia's most prized creation." Lauren turned to look at me, her innocent smile cutting deep. "I thought it'd be perfect for our engagement ceremony." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Lin and Carter families. What a perfect match. I heard Miss Lin graduated top of her class from the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Brussels. Finally, Ethan found someone truly worthy of him. Of course, she's got both the background and the talent, unlike some people. The crystal lights scattered into a million shards across the floor, just like the 5 years I had spent with Ethan, shattered, meaningless. My thoughts drifted back to 5 years ago, spring of my senior year in college. The design studio was always filled with fresh lilies sent by Ethan. He came every day, bringing the most expensive art books, sitting by me while I sketched. His presence stirred up the whole campus. Everyone was talking about it, how the heir of Story Jewelry, the crown prince of a business empire, had chased after a design major for an entire year. On the day of our graduation defense, he stood outside the academic building, gifting me a sea of roses. Everyone was dying with envy. I thought being with him would be the luckiest thing to ever happen in my life. "Give me 5 years," he said, gripping my hand tightly. "Once you're firmly established as the heir, we'll get married, okay?" But 5 years later, the ring I designed became the engagement ring he gave to another woman, while I was nothing more than the shadow of a former lover he couldn't acknowledge in public. My phone buzzed. It was from HR. 1600, room 1601. "Please bring all design drafts for handover at 9 a.m. tomorrow. You are to transfer your duties to Miss Lauren Lynn's assistant." At 3 a.m., I stood alone in the design studio of Story Jewelry. My fingertips brushed gently over each piece. Every one of them had my heart and soul poured into it, yet none of them would bear my name anymore. The screen glowed faintly in the dark. One by one, I deleted each draft, as if I were personally burying the past 5 years of my life. At exactly 9 a.m., I stood in front of room 1601. Through the frosted glass, I could see Lauren inside, already preparing for her interview. "I didn't expect to see you here, Mia." I turned to find Ethan standing behind me. I handed him my resignation letter. "Mr. Carter, this is my official notice." He glanced at it briefly, then paused and looked up. "You're really leaving? Miss Lynn's assistant?" I gave a quiet laugh. "Do you really think I deserve that honor, Mr. Carter?" I turned around and walked toward the elevator. "He's really letting her go just like that?" came the loud voice of Director Liu from down the hall. "He's not even going to stop her?" Ethan's voice was casual, lazy even. "Give it a week. Once she realizes she can't even land a design assistant role without Story's resources, she'll come crawling back." I booked a red-eye flight to Paris. In the deep autumn, the golden leaves blanketed the Champs-Élysées. My best friend had taken a day off just to pick me up. She worked as a jewelry buyer at LV's headquarters and said she wanted to show me some of the new season's designs to help clear my mind. "There's a gathering tonight," she said as she hooked her arm around mine. "It's all old friends from design school. Come with me." I shook my head. The last thing I wanted right now was to see anyone from our circle. But she ignored me and dragged me into a private room at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The moment I opened the door, I froze. Standing by the window was someone I hadn't seen in years, Professor Sean Harper, my old jewelry appreciation lecturer from college. He held a wine glass in his hand, his profile as refined and gentle as ever. It had been 6 years, but he looked exactly the same. "Professor Harper, you're here?" someone gasped. "You were too busy to attend the last exhibition. Just finished a meeting downstairs," he said, glancing in our direction. "Heard it was an old friends gathering." And there he was, the man I hadn't seen in 6 years. Even taller than Ethan, with a perfectly proportioned frame, the dark, custom-tailored suit emphasized his broad shoulders and long legs. His features were flawless. His deep black eyes were distant, cold, carrying a quiet warning to keep your distance. But the moment his gaze landed on me, I was pulled back in time to that design classroom 6 years ago. He was 27, I was 21. He always stood at the podium, immaculately dressed. Outside, the sycamores rustled softly. Sunlight filtered through the windows, falling gently on the knuckles of his hand as he held his pen. I always sat in the first row, obsessively taking note of every expression, every critique. He was, after all, a judge at the Paris Jewelry Design Exhibition that year. Under the table, my best friend nudged me with her foot. "Mia, don't you think maybe he's here for you?" I quickly looked away and shook my head. "No way, we haven't spoken since graduation." The dinner went on with laughter and glasses clinking. I was starting to feel a little tipsy. My best friend glanced at me, then at Sean, and suddenly asked, "Professor Harper, could you take Mia back to her hotel later? She's had a bit too much." "I don't feel comfortable letting her go alone," he said. I looked up in surprise. Sean Harper's gaze landed on my face and lingered for a few seconds before he nodded. "All right." My best friend leaned in close to my ear. "Babe, if Ethan could dump you for Lauren, why can't you find someone better? Especially someone like Sean Harper, what a catch. It'd be a shame not to go for it." "Stop it," I whispered. "He was our professor." "He's not anymore," she raised an eyebrow. "Trust me, I've seen enough men in my life. He's definitely into you." Sean's Maybach was waiting at the entrance of the hotel. The Parisian night breeze drifted in, carrying with it the romantic air unique to the Champs-Élysées. The champagne was beginning to hit me. I unfastened my seatbelt. "Thank you, Professor." He turned slightly. The streetlight cast a shadow along the side of his face. I noticed the slight movement of his Adam's apple, his slender fingers still resting casually on the steering wheel. Suddenly, Ethan's mocking voice echoed in my ears, followed by the delicate laughter of Lauren at the gala and the whispers of the crowd. "Would you like to come up and take a look at my new designs?" I heard myself say. The elevator lighting was warm, dim, and ambiguous. He turned toward me, his gaze deep and unreadable. The lingering effects of the wine stirred something in me. Almost involuntarily, I reached out and tugged on his tie. He straightened slightly, placing one hand beside my ear, pinning me gently. His cologne surrounded me, masculine and clean. Then he steadied me, as if he had been holding back for far too long, his desire forceful and burning. "Professor Harper, there are cameras here," I said between breaths. "I'm not your professor anymore," he whispered hoarsely, stopping me. His expensive blazer slipped to the floor by the doorway as he pressed me against the wall. We didn't even have time to turn on the lights. The night of Paris spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, outlining the elegant lines of his back and shoulders in silver moonlight. Suddenly, I remembered the charity design competition from 6 years ago. I'd stayed up for 3 days straight, completing my submission. His slender fingers had lightly touched my draft and commented, "The moonstone cut here is very innovative." I had looked up, sneaking a peek into his eyes, only to feel my heart skip a beat at the warmth in them, like polished jade. Embarrassed, I quickly looked down, trying to hide the burning flush of my ears, burying the hopeless crush I never dared to expose. Back then, I never could have imagined that one day he'd kiss me like this. I tugged gently on his tie, my voice barely a whisper, trembling. But it was like he'd lost all sense of restraint. It was madness, deeply suppressed, finally unleashed. I didn't know how much time passed. Eventually, he lifted me onto the bed. In the moonlight, I could see his shirt was completely wrinkled, a stark contrast to the meticulous man he always was. His usual restraint and orderliness had vanished entirely. Then I remembered what my best friend had said during dinner. "Do you know how many luxury brands have tried to poach him over the years? And how many women wanted to marry him? But not once has he been caught in a scandal. Everyone in the industry says he's emotionally unavailable." My eyes landed on the moonstone cufflink on his sleeve, the very one from my competition piece years ago. After winning, it had been auctioned off at a charity gala, bought by an anonymous bidder at a shockingly high price. So it was him. He followed my gaze, gently adjusting the cufflink with his fingers. The moonlight was soft, almost tender. My eyes suddenly welled up with tears. He didn't say a word, just leaned down and kissed the corner of my eye gently. On the 5th day in Paris, I received a message from Lucas Jiang. "When are you coming back to Riverton?" "Not for now," I replied. "Next week is Mr. Carter's 80th birthday. You should make an appearance," he advised. "Please give Mr. Carter my birthday wishes. I'm sorry I can't be there." I added, "He was kind to me these past 5 years. I'll make sure the birthday gift is delivered to his private room." Lucas looked at the message for a long moment before handing his phone to Ethan. "Why don't you call her yourself?" Ethan's fingers tapped lightly on the table. His expression was unreadable, darker than I'd ever seen. The champagne in his glass swirled, catching the light. When he finally spoke, his voice was as cold as ice. Lucas let out a long sigh. During this time, the board had been pressing harder. The Lin family, too, I knew. Ethan Carter stubbed out his cigarette, letting out a cold laugh from the back of his throat. "If I don't marry Lauren Lin, then I have to give up my position to that bastard." Lucas Jiang looked uneasy. "Mr. Carter, don't call him that. If someone hears, it'll stir up gossip. He's still your brother, even if he's your stepmother's son." "Let them talk," Ethan said. "What, you think I care?" "But what about Mia?" Lucas asked. Ethan looked up. His eyes were ice cold. "Story is mine, Mia is mine." His knuckles tightened unconsciously, the joints turning pale. "You think she can really leave me?" He let out a low scoff. "It's been 5 years. She's long been used to relying on me to survive. Without Story's resources, she couldn't even land a job as an assistant. She seems serious about it this time," Lucas said. Mia's always like that, Ethan said flatly, rubbing his left thumb where a custom ring he once designed used to sit. Looks stubborn, but she can't handle being ignored. His hand slipped into his suit jacket, brushing the spot on his finger ever so lightly. And Miss Lynn, Lucas asked, even if you marry her, then what? Ethan raised his glass. Mia's a sensible girl. Once I've secured my position, I'll make it up to her with something better. Lucas hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but Ethan had already stood up. Remember, no one is to contact her. If she wants to disappear, let her. I want to see how long she can last. The night rain in Paris had just let up. Beneath the golden dome of a Michelin 3-star restaurant, Sean Harper sat across from me. His long, graceful fingers moved elegantly as he picked out the celery from his salad with a knife and fork. Suddenly, I was reminded of that one meal back in college, the only time we ever ate in the school cafeteria. I had forgotten my meal card and happened to run into him. He sat across from me then too, just like now. At the time, everyone in the department was buzzing with rumors that he and Professor Tang Yan were dating. She was a prodigy from the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Brussels and had won an International Jewelry Design Award at just 25. I didn't say a word throughout the whole meal. I felt my silent crush was pathetic, but he kept talking, patiently giving feedback on my most recent design assignment. I nodded absently, distracted, barely responding. Then Ethan appeared like a gust of wind, sweeping me away from that silent, one-sided crush before it could come to anything. What are you thinking about? Sean's voice pulled me back to the present. I looked up and said softly, just thinking, you're not exactly heartless either. He shook his head with a soft smile. Last time we ate together, you left all the celery on your plate. You remember that? I asked, surprised. I remember a lot of things, he said after a pause. For example, you used to love working with moonstones. You once said they looked like pools of autumn water. He lowered his gaze and carefully pushed the celery aside on his plate. Or how you'd unconsciously bite the end of your pencil when you designed. The knife in my hand paused over the steak. Those were all habits from my university days. Later, when I worked at Story, I gave up on moonstones because Ethan said they felt too cold, not commercial enough. I also broke the habit of biting pencils because it wasn't elegant. And Professor Tang? I asked casually, lifting my glass. I heard she had an exhibition in London last year. Sean's hand paused mid-motion. She got married to a Belgian jeweler. We were always just friends. He looked straight at me, his eyes clear and sincere. I took a sip of wine, unsure what to say next. The light reflected off the moonstone on his cufflink, the same gentle shimmer I remembered in his eyes when he used to look at me. I heard you've had quite a few admirers in Paris over the years, Professor Harper, I said, tilting my head to break the silence. Not really, he said softly, eyes still on mine. Work keeps me busy. Want to see my studio? He asked suddenly. It's just across the street. Paris after the rain still carried a cool, damp scent in the air. The elevator was quiet, the only sound was our breathing. The after effects of the wine began to rise slowly. I looked at the side of his face, and suddenly remembered an afternoon 6 years ago, his slender fingers lightly tapping my design sketch, saying, "This is a bold idea." The side profile I had seen 6 years ago overlapped perfectly with the flawless man before me now. Almost without thinking, I rose on tiptoe and steadied myself against him. He clearly tensed, then wrapped his arms around me. We stumbled into the studio, barely managing to close the door. He didn't even have time to turn on the lights. His kiss was gentle, but laced with an undeniable possessiveness. I was trapped between him and the wall, his long fingers unfastening my buttons. Every touch made it harder to stand. His jacket slipped onto the carpet. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pinning me against the floor-to-ceiling window. The cold glass made me shiver, and he instantly turned me around and held me close. "Greedy little wolf," he whispered, biting my ear. I shook my head and reached up to hold him by the neck. He let out a low laugh and kissed the side of my neck. His shirt was half undone, revealing the fine, sculpted lines of his chest. His palm moved slowly along my back, as if caressing something rare and precious. For a moment, I felt like I had returned to the autumn of my 21st year. Sunlight streaming through the glass windows of the design studio, while he critiqued student projects. I would sneak glances at him, watching his thick lashes cast faint shadows on his cheeks, and the subtle, almost invisible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. That was how I fell for him, so defenselessly, drawn to his furrowed brow, his serious expression, and the clean, subtle scent he carried. Mia. He whispered my name with elegance. The last trace of clarity drowned in desire. I tilted my head up to receive his kiss, his breath washing over me, thick with the richness of red wine. His fingers set fire to my skin, every touch stealing the strength from my legs. Does it hurt? He suddenly paused, his eyes filled with an unfathomable tenderness. I shook my head, my fingertips brushing along his tense jaw. He grabbed my hand and kissed the center of my palm with reverence. We tangled under the moonlight. His movements grew wilder, yet he never let me get hurt, never let me bump into anything. I didn't know how long it lasted. When it finally ended, I collapsed into his arms. He carried me to the bathroom, his touch surprisingly gentle. Should I turn on the light? He asked softly. I murmured against his chest, still a little dizzy. The light came on, and I saw, beside the desk, a glass display case. Inside were several neatly arranged design sketches. I stepped closer. These were the pieces I had submitted for design competitions back in college. He had kept them all in perfect condition, not even a corner torn or folded. The sketch of the teardrop-shaped moonstone cut, my very first classroom presentation, was among them. I widened my eyes and turned to look at him. Sean was buttoning his shirt, and his voice was soft. Your designs have always moved me. Mr. Carter's birthday celebration was approaching. I had someone send the gift to the Carter residence in advance. It was a pocket watch, inlaid with a teardrop-shaped moonstone. The stone glowed gently under the light, like a pool of autumn water. Sean had commissioned the best studio in Brussels for the piece. He had personally handled the design. The outer case combined traditional cloud patterns with modern geometric lines. His personal logo, CR, was engraved on the watch, but this time, next to it, hung a small lowercase q. As I looked at the finished product inside the box, I was suddenly reminded of that rough sketch from 6 years ago. Back then, I had hesitated for ages before even showing it to him, afraid he might reject it. And now, I actually had a co-designed piece with him. I've always wanted to realize that design of yours, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. His voice was low. Do you remember? You once said you wanted to shape moonlight into a teardrop. I froze. I hadn't expected him to remember that so clearly. It's a pity, he added, his tone filled with a faint regret, that it's a gift for someone else. I turned to look at him, those warm, familiar eyes, that calm, composed expression. He was still the same as 6 years ago, always so meticulous. As for me, I had grown a lot in the past 5 years. Out of nowhere, I said, I'll design a special piece just for you, my best work. I leaned in close to him. Thank you, I whispered. He lowered his head and steadied me before I could finish speaking. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter held the pocket watch in his hand, his gaze fixed on the tiny engraved Q. The teardrop-shaped moonstone shimmered with a soft glow under the light. The craftsmanship was flawless, absolutely impeccable. This is Sean Harper's work, Lucas Jung said as he leaned in to take a closer look. So rare. Get lost, Ethan snapped coldly, suddenly throwing the pocket watch onto the table. He remembered that design, 5 years ago, when Mia had just joined Story. She'd excitedly shown him that very sketch. He told her it was too artsy, not commercial enough. After that, she never brought it up again. And now she'd learned how to collaborate with someone else. Sir, your drink, the butler hesitated mid-sentence. Ethan ignored him and kept drinking. His eyes were locked on that Q, unwavering. Mia's signature, he knew it better than anyone. Back when she worked at Story, every single one of her drafts had her delicate handwriting at the bottom, just like her, graceful, refined. But now her signature sat right beside Sean Harper's logo. Get out. All of you, get the hell out. He suddenly stood up, hurling the wine bottle against the wall. It shattered into pieces. The stomach pain came fast and fierce. He curled up on the sofa, sweat beading on his forehead. The pain was all too familiar. Every time it hit, Mia would place her warm hand on his stomach and gently massage in circles. She would crouch beside the couch, her brows furrowed tightly, whispering complaints about how poorly he treated his health. Ethan Carter, if you die, I'll design pure silver funeral jewelry just for you, she'd threaten. But he always knew she didn't mean it. His Mia even spoiled him through her designs. If moonstones were too cold, she would switch to emerald teardrops. If he said it wasn't commercial enough, she'd go learn diamond cuts. But now that same teardrop-shaped moonstone was glowing in the light, beside someone else's name. It pierced his eyes. Mia, listen to me. Lucas's voice grew anxious. He's vomiting blood. We're taking him straight to the ER. I see, I replied calmly. He's never been this bad before. You know him best. What meds does he usually take? Whatever the doctor prescribes, that's what he should take. There was a pause on the other end. Mia? Lucas called again. Oh, right, I said brightly. Lucas, from now on, don't tell me anything about him again. The line went dead. In the hospital room, Lucas slowly turned around, regretting that he had put the call on speaker. Ethan ripped out the IV line. Get out. He roared. All of you, get the fuck out. Mr. Carter, please calm down, the nurse said, trying to restrain him. Bring me a drink. He rasped. Mr. Carter, the doctor said, I said bring me a fucking drink. Ethan. Lucas finally exploded. What the hell are you doing? Mia's gone, and this is what you choose to become. Ethan looked up at him. His eyes were bloodshot. You don't understand anything. Then tell me, Lucas shouted. What do you want? You want Mia to come back and take care of you? Then tell me what you ever gave her in return. You let her watch while you proposed to Lauren Lynn. You never gave her a title. You never gave her a name. The room fell into a dead silence. Ethan closed his eyes. Something hot slipped from the corner of his eye, but he said nothing. His fingers were still clenched tightly around the bedsheet, knuckles pale white. Sean Harper took me to a little Chinese restaurant he knew. He could tell I was homesick. Next month was the Alston Design Competition. In Paris, he served me a bowl of soup. Do you want to participate? He asked. I tasted the soup. It was a familiar flavor. I do, I replied. Of course I do. The Alston International Jewelry Design Competition, it's one of the top 3 professional contests. Then I teased, but I'll have to calculate whether I can afford another month in Paris. Stay with me, he said suddenly. I froze, my chopsticks suspended midair. Mia, he set his bowl down and looked at me seriously. Be with me. Professor Harper, don't call me that, he interrupted softly. You know I'm not pursuing you as a teacher. I lowered my eyes and stared at the rippling soup in my bowl. Is this because of Ethan Carter? He asked. How did he know about Ethan? I stiffened slightly. No, I said, but your heart's still with him. I thought about it seriously. To say that I didn't feel anything at all wouldn't be true. You can't just erase 5 years like they were nothing. Sean's fingers tensed subtly, but I continued. But those feelings, they're no longer love. I looked into his eyes. You know something? I thought I'd be devastated these past few days, that I'd lose sleep, miss him constantly, but I realized I don't really care that much anymore. I spoke softly. Maybe I stopped loving him a long time ago. Maybe it was the moment he started brushing me off, showing less interest. That's when I already knew how it would end. Sean looked at me quietly, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. But right now I still don't want to start something new. Why? He asked. I looked down, because I'm afraid I won't even be able to offer the most basic trust. I can wait, he said, holding my hand. Don't waste your time on me, I said gently. You think I'm too old? He asked with a forced smile. Of course not. He looked almost the same as he had 6 years ago, only a bit leaner and his gaze harder to read. I just want to focus on my work right now, I said, pulling my hand away. I don't want to think about relationships. Then what are we now? He asked, his voice low. I held back tears and avoided looking at him. If you're okay with it, I said, we can keep things the way they are. You can walk away anytime. Sean stood up suddenly. The chair scraped softly against the wooden floor. The restaurant was silent except for the crackling fire in the fireplace. He stood in front of me for a moment, the corners of his mouth curling into a faint smile. Sean? I looked up. I'm going out for a walk, he said as he adjusted his sleeves. His voice was still gentle. Take your time with dinner. His back looked so lonely. He paused slightly at the door, but didn't turn around. I sat there in silence for a long time. Check, please, I told the waiter. The gentleman already took care of it, the waiter replied as he wheeled over a cart. He also ordered this for you. I looked at the dessert on the cart, a warm bowl of lotus seed and red date soup. He said you barely ate, he wanted to make sure you had something before you left. The steam from the bowl blurred my vision. Even when walking away, he hadn't forgotten to care for my feelings, to care for my stomach. Sean Harper was always that kind of person. And me? I had hurt him in the most humiliating way possible, reducing everything between us into something cheap and disposable. I picked up the bowl. The dessert was still perfectly warm. At that moment, I couldn't help but think, if I had known it would come to this, I never would have acted on impulse that night. I wouldn't have reached out and pulled in someone so clean, so good. Late at night, only one desk lamp was lit in the studio. Sean opened the deepest drawer of his safe and took out a necklace. The silver sycamore leaf pendant shimmered softly under the light. It was my graduation piece. One side was inlaid with moonstone, the other side with obsidian, he remembered. He once said it represented light and darkness, softness and strength. Back then, his eyes were as bright as stars. It was the fall 6 years ago, the first time he walked into that library. Sunlight filtered through the sycamore leaves, casting dappled shadows across his design sketch. He always sat in the very back, quietly sketching. He'd stand behind the bookshelves, chewing on the end of his pencil in a daze. Then suddenly, his eyes would light up, as if he'd caught a spark of inspiration. And in that moment, it was like something struck him straight in the heart. Later, I became his favorite student, not because of talent, but because of my persistence. While others chased trends and markets, I stubbornly clung to my own style. Just like that sycamore leaf. Diamonds were flashier, sure, but I chose to pair moonstone and obsidian instead. Half a month ago, while consulting at a Paris workshop, he happened to catch a glimpse of a custom tie clip. One glance, and he recognized the emerald inlay, the cut, the setting, the technique. It was exactly his style. A perfect 45-degree angle with a curved edge. His signature approach. But he wasn't the client. The name attached to the order was Lauren Lin. For the first time in years, he reached out to an old family friend. When the friend mentioned the alliance between Story and the Lin family, he understood everything. He had designed our encounter in Paris. But he never expected what followed. Or maybe fate had a hand in it. Maybe it was grace, this sudden, fleeting reunion after endless waiting. But now, was it about to end again? Sean Harper returned the necklace to the safe and looked out at the moonlight. The Paris night was quiet, just like him when he sketched. All those designs that Ethan Carter once rejected were lying quietly in Sean's collection. Teardrop-cut moonstones, Eastern aesthetic. He had grown too, but his sharp edges had softened. Over the years, he never missed a single one of my new designs. He watched me change little by little, and said nothing. The Mia I am now is like a wounded bird, graceful during the day, but trembling in his arms when night falls. The soul who once dared to challenge diamonds with moonstone was now locked in a cage called maturity. Maybe a fleeting, undefined relationship wasn't such a bad thing. He didn't expect much. At least now, he could stay by my side without hiding. He wasn't in a rush, just like that silver sycamore leaf, waiting quietly under the moonlight. 6 years had passed. What harm was there in waiting a little longer? So you turned him down? My best friend's voice over the phone was full of disbelief. I held my coffee and stared at the swirling liquid inside. I don't want to be in a relationship right now. So you told him you wanted to be friends with benefits? There was frustration in her voice, like she wanted to shake some sense into me. Mia, are you out of your mind? Wait, she cut me off. Do you know what he's been through these years? Don't, I said quickly. No, you need to know. She took a deep breath. I'm going to show you something. A notification popped up. It was a photo, taken secretly from a crack in Sean's office door, 5 years ago. In the photo, he was sitting at his office desk at the university, holding a necklace, staring intently at the pendant. Even though the photo was a bit blurry, I recognized it immediately. It was my graduation design. A silver sycamore leaf. Moonstone on the front, obsidian on the back. I had never told anyone that pendant's name was Secret Crush. 3,000 beams of moonlight falling upon the heart, only to sink into the night like water. I never told anyone else. During the thesis defense, I only said it represented the contrast between light and darkness, but it carried my most innocent, Secret feelings, feelings I buried myself inside the archive of my graduation project. I was going to run back and tell you that day. My best friend's voice softened over the phone. But when I rushed back to the studio, I saw Ethan Carter holding roses and hugging you. She paused. I'm sorry. This gala in Paris. It was Sean Harper who asked me to arrange it. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone, so none of it had been accidental. The kiss in the elevator, the night in the design studio, it had all been a carefully planned reunion. Only he didn't know. In that perfectly designed encounter, I had hurt him recklessly, without restraint. Mia, have you ever thought? Her voice grew even softer. That maybe, from the very beginning, you chose the wrong person? I put the phone down and looked out at the Paris night. The city still shimmered with dazzling lights, just like it had 6 years ago, from the top floor of the university library. Back then, I always kept my head down around Sean Harper. I didn't dare look him in the eye, afraid he'd see through me. I hid my secret crush in my designs, too scared to ever say it aloud. Then Ethan came along like a gust of wind, pulling me out of that quiet affection. I thought it was salvation, but maybe it was just escape. I had mistaken being moved for love, mistaken dependence for habit, and slowly I lost myself in that relationship. Even stopped using moonstones, the stone I loved most. Now I was making the same mistake all over again. But the problem in that relationship had never been me. It was that I was too timid. I would rather lock my heart away than trust love again. Looking back now, I've been a coward all these years. Because of fear, I never told Sean how I felt. Because of fear, I clung to Ethan Carter out of habit, until I lost who I was completely. And now, I wanted to hide again behind the same excuse. But that's enough. I can't live like this anymore. I lost to Ethan's manipulation. I lost to my own cowardice. But I refused to keep losing to time. I grabbed my coat and rushed out of the room. At this hour, he was probably still at the studio. The elevator was taking too long, so I turned and headed for the stairwell. But as I pushed open the door, I froze. Sean Harper was standing there, as if he had just been about to come up. We met at the landing. The stairwell lighting cast a soft glow across his face. He still looked as gentle and refined as ever, just like that very first time I saw him in the library. But now, there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. Mia, he said softly, I wanted to tell you. He paused. I agree. Agree? My heart tightened. I agree to keep things as they are. He looked into my eyes, his voice calm. If that's what you need, I can just be someone you turn to from time to time. I stared at him, and suddenly my eyes filled with tears. I don't agree, I said, taking a step forward. His expression shifted slightly. Let's start over, I said, lifting my gaze to meet his. Let's get to know each other again, not as student and teacher, just Mia and Sean. His eyes flickered. Then, after a moment of silence, the corners of his mouth lifted into a soft, warm smile. Mia? He stepped closer, his voice low. Congratulations on your graduation. I froze. That was the sentence he never got to say 5 years ago. I really like you, he said, his eyes locked on mine, each word deliberate. Will you let me pursue you? The stairwell lighting was dim, but it lit up the quiet depth in his eyes. Turns out, a secret crush was never a one-person show. We had just wasted all our best years hesitating. Okay, I nodded. He reached out and pulled me into his arms. This time, I didn't back away. We had 5 years to make up for. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter slammed a pearl bracelet onto the table. His voice was chilling. How could none of them be found? Miss Carter deleted them completely, one of his assistants reported, handing him a folder. Even the backups are gone. Useless, Ethan hissed, then kicked over the trash can. Not a single design draft could be missing. He spent 3 full days searching through Story's entire database, even sparing no expense to hire top data recovery experts. Those designs he had once dismissed were now stabbing at his heart like knives. Finally, after half a month, he recovered the files. Not just the designs Mia had created at Story, but even sketches from her college years. Among them was the teardrop-cut moonstone, Eastern aesthetics. Every piece was like a portrait of her, cool, transparent, unwavering. He had never really looked at those works before. But now, with each one, he saw just how much she had evolved during her time at Story. Sir, Lucas said, handing him a photo, taken in Paris. In the photo, Mia wore a champagne-colored gown, her hand looped around a man's arm. She was smiling, her eyes arched like crescent moons. A smile Ethan hadn't seen in 5 years. His fingers trembled as he stared at the image. The man's back was tall and straight, dressed in a custom-made suit. "Find out who he is," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "I want everything." He hurled the recovered designs into the shredder. The sound of paper tearing felt like his own chest being ripped open. "Mia, how far do you think you can run?" He sent her a message. "I had your designs restored." 2 days passed. No reply. That wasn't the Mia he remembered. She could never stand being ignored by him. One call was usually enough to bring her back with teary eyes. Even if she was angry, she would at least reply with a sullen one-liner. But this time, not even a period. At 3 a.m., he finally couldn't take it and called her. The phone rang with a few busy tones. With each beep, his heartbeat sped up. He thought of the designs he had so cruelly discarded. Thought of the way she had walked away, calm, steady. She had already made up her mind to let go. He just hadn't believed she would ever really leave. The call connected. "Sorry," a warm male voice answered, sounding drowsy with sleep. "Mia's still in bed." Ethan's fingers clenched. That voice, so familiar, so casual, stabbed straight into his heart. No one had ever called her that so freely, and he had never allowed anyone else to call her that. "Put her on," he said, voice ice cold. The man on the other end sounded even more relaxed. "Didn't expect a call from Mr. Carter this early. Is something urgent?" I said, "Put her on the phone," Ethan growled through clenched teeth. "She was tired last night," the man replied with a half-smile in his tone. "I hope you'll understand." "You son of a bitch," Ethan exploded. "It took you a month to get into her bed?" Silence. Then the man's tone turned cold. "Watch your mouth. You don't have the right to speak about her that way." "I don't have the right?" Ethan sneered. "Mia was mine for 5 years. "So what?" The man cut him off. "That's over now." Ethan was stunned into silence. "She's not yours anymore," the man said flatly. "She belongs to someone else. Don't be jealous." And then the line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone. For the first time in 5 years, a feeling he'd never known gripped him tight. Panic. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. That voice, Mia, it echoed in his ears like a curse. Just then his assistant burst through the door. "Sir, we found him. The man with Miss Carter is Sean Harper." Ethan's head snapped up, eyes bloodshot. Sean Harper, the rising star in the jewelry design world, his most anticipated rival. The man who, 2 years ago, had nearly beaten him for one of the biggest projects of his career. All thanks to Sean Harper. The assistant stammered. "He was Miss Carter's professor in college." "Keep looking into it," Ethan Carter barked, his voice sharp. "Find out when they started seeing each other. I want every detail." But he cut himself off mid-sentence. A thought flashed in his mind, darkening his expression even further. That engraved logo on the back of the Moonstone pocket watch. CLQ. Of course. Of course. Crash. He flipped the coffee table, scattering papers everywhere. "You're going to Paris?" Lucas asked. "The Alston design competition is starting soon." Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, voice cold. "As a sponsor, how could I not go?" He deliberately ignored the fact that Mia Carter was also on the list of participants. Lauren Lynn followed him to Paris. "I'll be competing too," she said with a smile, looping her arm through his. Ethan didn't respond. He knew perfectly well whose designs she had been copying. He had found Mia's new address in Paris, and had gone there twice over the past few days, only to wander around outside. The first time, he saw her come out holding Sean's arm. She was wearing a pale blue dress and stood on tiptoe to fix his tie. The man bent down and whispered something to her. Her eyes curved into crescent moons as she laughed. The second time, he stood under a street lamp for 2 hours, just watching. When the lights on the top floor finally went out, he saw her standing dazed on the balcony, bathed in moonlight. She overlapped so clearly with the Mia he remembered, except that moonlight no longer belonged to him. Once, he found her clingy. Now, even stealing a glance from afar felt like a luxury. On the day of the competition, Ethan's palms were slightly sweaty. He seemed more nervous than the contestants. Lauren clung to his arm as they entered the venue, but her eyes kept scanning the crowd, clearly searching for someone. "Professor Harper," Lauren suddenly spoke up. Ethan snapped his head up. The man stood there, calm and composed, dressed in a dark, tailored suit, with a teardrop-cut moonstone pinned to his tie. That moonstone cut, Ethan knew it too well. It was Mia's old design style. Lauren, Sean greeted her with a polite nod. It's been a while. Lauren's voice faltered slightly, as if caught off guard. Ethan was surprised. It was the first time he'd seen Lauren look so uneasy. This is, Sean's eyes shifted to him, gaze indifferent, like he was looking at someone utterly unimportant. Ethan felt a fire ignite in his chest. All he wanted was to punch that face. This is Ethan Carter, Lauren introduced quickly, tightening her grip on his arm as if making a point. The sponsor of this competition, and my fiancé. I've heard the news. Congratulations, Sean replied, voice warm but devoid of emotion. Ethan felt the fingers on his arm curl tighter. Professor Harper, Lauren said sweetly, please take good care of us during the judging. Apologies, Sean smiled faintly. I've withdrawn from the judging panel. Why? Lauren instinctively stepped forward. Because, his tone remained calm, but there was a trace of quiet pride. The person I'm pursuing is also participating in this competition. I don't want my scoring to be biased. Ethan's heart dropped. Sean's eyes had already moved past them. The pair of eyes that had always been so cool and distant were now tinged with a gentle light. Mia, he called softly. I looked up and saw Ethan standing there beside Lauren. He looked sharp in his suit. She wore a champagne-colored dress, the two of them shoulder to shoulder, looking picture-perfect. I had thought seeing them again would hurt. But even my heartbeat stayed calm. It was Sean's voice that made my ears warm, reminding me of the words he whispered beside me last night. Don't worry, I'll be here tomorrow. It's been a while, Mr. Carter, I said with a calm smile. Ethan's gaze landed on Sean's hand wrapped around my waist. His expression darkened so much it looked like it could drip ink. I heard Miss Lynn's entry is quite impressive this time, I said, turning to Lauren. Looking forward to seeing your work. Her face turned slightly pale, her eyes flicking between Sean and me. You two? She began. I'm pursuing Mia, Sean said plainly. Sean Harper's voice remained calm and gentle. I promised to give her a chance, he said. As he spoke, he looked down at me, his gaze so focused it felt like I was the most precious thing in the world. This year's entry. Ethan Carter suddenly spoke up. Sean didn't take his eyes off me. I heard it's quite special. There's nothing special about it, I said evenly, meeting Ethan's eyes. It's made with inexpensive stones. Let me guess, Lauren Lynn sneered. Moonstone again? I saw the watch you gave Grandpa, she added. It doesn't have much commercial value. Art should never be measured by its commercial worth, Sean interjected, his tone calm but firm. Truly exceptional design reflects the designer's inner world. At the venue, Lauren stood before her display, the hem of her gown glimmering under the lights. Her necklace combined diamonds and sapphires, with the main stone cut in a striking 45-degree circular technique. I stood in the audience and suddenly smiled. That was the exact piece I'd gifted Ethan a month ago for our 5-year anniversary. Miss Lynn, could you tell us the inspiration behind this design? One of the judges asked, adjusting his glasses. I've always loved oceanic elements, Lauren responded with a graceful smile. Sapphires remind me of the purity of seawater. But your previous works leaned heavily on malachite and emeralds, another judge noted as he flipped through her portfolio. And this cutting technique has never appeared in your designs before. What inspired such a dramatic change in style? Lauren's smile faltered. Her eyes instinctively searched the crowd for Ethan, as if pleading for help. These are just some of my recent experiments, she said. The judge raised an eyebrow. It's quite a refined technique for an experiment, this particular teardrop curve and angular treatment. He flipped further through his folder, then stopped. I knew exactly what he was looking at. My signature works from the past few years, included in my contestant profile. He looked up, seemingly about to speak, but paused. Behind his gold-rimmed glasses, his eyes flicked between Ethan and Lauren. Then he quietly closed the folder. All right, he said mildly. We understand. Thank you, Miss Lynn. A very nice design. When it was my turn, I opened the velvet display case. The spotlight fell on me like a beam of cold moonlight. This is a wristwatch, I said, my voice resonating throughout the venue. Its inspiration comes from the eternal nature of time and the meaning of waiting. The screen behind me projected a live camera feed of the piece. Inside the dial, moonstone shimmered with a gentle flowing light. The outer ring, crafted from obsidian, sat quietly and modestly, The two stones reflected each other, light and dark, cold and warm. I gently turned the dial, and the moonstone caught the light with delicate brilliance. As the moon phase rotated, the obsidian shifted with it. No matter what shape the moon takes, I continued softly, the night always embraces it, protects it. One of the judges stepped closer to the stage, inspecting the piece. "This concept is very fresh," said a senior judge, adjusting his glasses, "but it's technically very challenging. A small error would ruin the entire mechanism." "Can the watch function properly?" another judge asked. I removed the slightly smaller version from my own wrist. "This is the working model." The judge held it under the light and observed carefully. As the hands moved, the moon phase shifted naturally, the interplay of light and shadow telling a quiet, ancient story. "The movement is cleverly designed," the technical judge commented as he examined the back. "To allow the moon phase to change so smoothly without affecting timekeeping precision, this requires exceptional calculation." "One last question," the judge said as he flipped through my documents. "The name of this piece is—" I took a deep breath. "Frozen Moon." A ripple went through the audience. I saw Ethan's face suddenly twist with displeasure. "Why that name?" the judge asked. "Because," I said softly, "it's a prophecy about time. The moon's phases come and go, waxing, waning, full, and crescent, but the cold night remains unchanged." I paused for a moment. Time flows forward, but waiting? Waiting is eternal. That line felt like it was meant for myself, yet also for the person in the audience who had never looked away from me. Lauren Lynn stood on the podium, holding the gold trophy in her hands, her lips curved in a perfectly rehearsed smile. The spotlight was blinding, making her slightly dizzy. It was a silent farce, understood by all. She knew the judges had seen through the truth, but out of respect for the sponsor, they didn't call her out. The trophy in her hands burned like fire, just like that suffocating summer afternoon 4 years ago. She had just returned from studying abroad when her father told her he had hired the best tutor for her. Sean Harper had walked into the art studio, framed by the backlight, tall and poised, wearing his usual gentle smile. She remembered his long, slender fingers pointing to her designs. Remembered his deep voice, explaining color theory and curvature. She used to intentionally leave small mistakes in her work, just to hear his gentle correction. This angle could be tightened just a bit. Her heart would pound. The sunlight in the studio would fall softly across his face, and she would secretly sketch the lines of his silhouette, indulging in a teenage fantasy of romance. In front of him, she was always lively and bold, but his eyes always remained calm, distant. She had planned to confess her feelings. She even bought the most expensive watch as a gift. But that day, when she dropped her wallet in the studio, she saw a photo inside it. The photo was a little worn, as if it had been looked at many times. It showed a girl sitting in the corner of a library, head down as she sketched. Her long hair fell gently over her shoulders. Sunlight poured through the curtains, highlighting the soft curve of her cheek. She wore a simple white blouse, yet she carried a grace that was hard to define, like a pool of autumn water, still and gentle. That was the look, the one he never showed to anyone else. The tenderness she'd never seen before, he gave entirely to that girl. His expression was always cool when flipping through her designs, but when he pulled out that photo, the light in his eyes softened, like moonlight spilling across the surface of a quiet lake. In that moment, Lauren realized her crush had always been futile. All her carefully crafted smiles, all the mistakes she'd made on purpose, under the weight of that quiet gaze, they were laughable. She never thought that 4 years later she'd come face to face with that very girl, right inside the headquarters of Story Jewelry. The elevator doors opened, and she saw that familiar silhouette. The girl was still just as gentle, just as graceful, flipping through her design drafts with her head slightly bowed. Her long hair still fell softly over her shoulders. In that moment, Lauren finally understood why Sean had said her work lacked depth. Mia? The girl from the photo was named Mia. Lauren began asking around, subtly. That's when she learned Mia had been with Ethan Carter for 5 years, without ever being given a proper place in his life. Quietly, she looked through Mia's past designs. Each one was just like her, understated, refined, carrying an elusive light. Ideas that Ethan dismissed as too niche turned out to be breathtaking. Enviable. Her father told her the Carter family needed support from the Lynns. She was told to marry Ethan Carter. It was supposed to be a win-win arrangement, a business deal. She didn't refuse. Maybe she thought this could be her revenge, take me as love, take her designs, make her taste heartbreak for once. That, perhaps, would be the only joy Lauren could squeeze out of a marriage she never really wanted. But who could have guessed how things would end today? Her revenge had backfired, only pushing Mia back into Sean Harper's arms. And Sean? He was still the same Sean Harper. Only now, when he looked at Mia, there was no need to hide the tenderness in his eyes. Lauren looked down at the golden trophy in her hands. It suddenly felt heavier than ever. She suddenly smiled. He had lost completely. The man who had secretly loved someone for 6 years had finally found his moonlight. And Ethan's obsession, in the end, became nothing more than a pathetic joke. The night was deep. A luxury car cruised through the streets of Paris, neon lights flashing past Lauren's delicate profile through the window, bright and dark, over and over. "Ethan," she suddenly said, her voice light. He didn't respond. His gaze remained fixed outside the window. They had been silent the entire ride, like two strangers trapped in the same cage. "You know," she gave a faint smile, "I used to think I understood what it meant to love someone. Back in that sunlit studio, during those self-righteous teenage years. But today, I finally get it." She looked at her reflection in the window. "Turns out, one-sided love always brings you back to where you started." She took off her engagement ring and gently placed it on the seat between them. The diamond refracted fragments of light in the dark, just like the broken pieces of her girlish dreams. "We're both people who stayed too long in the same place," she said. "But you still have one last chance." "What do you mean?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "If you want her back, then get out of the car. Now." Her voice was calm. "I'll tell my father I was the one who broke off the engagement." Silence settled over the car again. The night of Paris drifted past the windows like a dream that refused to end. They sat side by side, yet felt even more distant than strangers. Sean watched as I stared blankly at the silver trophy in my hands. I shook my head. "It doesn't matter. The design was mine after all." He frowned. "The judges told me the craftsmanship and creativity of Han Yue were flawless." I knew what he was thinking. If it hadn't been for Story being the sponsor, Lauren would never have taken first place. "I went to the judges myself," I said, lifting my eyes to his. "What?" He looked stunned. "The winning piece is going to be auctioned for charity." I didn't want. I paused and gently reached for his hand, slipping the watch onto his wrist. "It belongs to you." The moonstone shimmered warmly against his skin, and the shape of his wrist looked even more elegant than usual. He lowered his head to look at the dial, and I saw a softness in his eyes that could melt into water. The hands ticked forward. With each movement, the moon phase rotated. The obsidian remained silent, guarding the moonlight beside it. "Mia," he suddenly called my name. I looked up just in time to see him take out a deep blue velvet box from his suit pocket. The box was small, but it felt like it held the weight of the world. He knelt on one knee as graceful as ever. When he opened the box, time seemed to stop. It was a ring. In the center of the ring was a platinum sycamore leaf. This time, the moonstone and obsidian were no longer on opposite sides. Instead, they were perfectly embedded together, meeting in the center of the leaf, reflecting each other like the moon sinking into the vast night sky. "I want to tell you," he said, eyes deep and unwavering. "Light and night were never meant to oppose each other. They were always meant to exist together. Just like you and me." That's when I finally understood. He hadn't just kept my designs. He understood the feelings between every line and curve. The emotions I never dared to speak aloud, he had woven them into every detail of this ring. The love I had buried as a girl, he brought it to life in the most beautiful way. "Will you marry me?" His voice was soft but so sure, so resolute, there was no room for hesitation. "Let's begin our story again, starting from this ring." I had never imagined that my reunion with Ethan Carter would happen like this. That day marked the last rain of autumn in Paris. The sky had just cleared. I walked out of the restaurant, arm in arm with Sean. I was wearing a champagne-colored dress, walking in slender heels, bathed in sunlight. The joy from the engagement still lingered on my brows and in the corners of my eyes, until I saw him standing there. Ethan's gray suit was wrinkled, his tie hung loosely around his neck, and there were red veins in his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. The man who used to be so meticulously put together now looked so disheveled, it was almost frightening. "Mia," he called my name, voice hoarse, as if it took all the strength in his body just to say it. Sean's arm at my waist tightened protectively, gently shielding me as Ethan took a step forward. "Come home," Ethan said, his voice carrying a plea I had never heard from him before. "I've already called off the engagement with the Lin family. Let's get married, okay? I'll give you anything you want, your designs, your dreams. I'll support everything you believe in." Standing across from him, all I could think of was that end-of-year banquet, when he stood high above me like a distant moon, untouchable. And now he stood here, lowering himself, pleading with me to return. "I had a ring made by the best workshop in Switzerland," he said, pulling a velvet box from his suit pocket with shaking fingers. "You always loved teardrop cuts, didn't you? I had this made just for you. I cut him off. Ethan?" I lifted my left hand. The sycamore leaf ring shimmered with a gentle glow under the sun, the moonstone and obsidian nestled together in perfect harmony. His gaze landed on the ring. His pupils contracted. He must have recognized it. It came from my graduation design 6 years ago. Back then he had called it too artsy, not commercial enough. But Sean had turned it into the most romantic confession I'd ever received. "It's too late," I said softly. "I've already found someone who truly understands how to appreciate moonlight." His hand dropped to his side. The velvet box slipped from his fingers and landed on the ground with a dull thud. The priceless diamond ring rolled out, catching the sunlight and reflecting a sharp, dazzling brilliance. But none of that light could compare to the gentle glow of the moonstone on my finger. Sean guided me into the car, carefully smoothing the folds of my dress as I sat down. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Ethan slowly kneel on the pavement, picking up the ring that had rolled away. The autumn rain began to fall, soaking his suit. But I didn't look back. The setting sun cast a soft golden light over the Seine River. Among the glimmers of the waves, I seemed to see myself standing in the old design studio at Story. Those stifled ideas, those beliefs that had been constantly rejected, those cautious days, all of it washed clean by this fall rain. From that moment on, the name Ethan Carter would be just like the thousands of strangers walking the streets of Paris. I wouldn't force myself to forget, but it would no longer stir my heart. "Mia," Sean whispered beside me, "let's go home." I turned to look at him. The light shimmered in his eyes, just like the moonstone on my ring. I used to think love meant compromise and tolerance. But after meeting him, I finally understood. True love is about mutual admiration and unwavering protection. Just like that watch, just like this ring, the moonlight and the night exist together, creating a complete world. Some say promises are just illusions, but I choose to believe in Sean. Because, more than anything, I finally believe in myself. And that this time, my love will not be wasted.